how overwhelming it is to deal with all the ed tech choices out there. We have some insight for you when you're planning and trying to figure out what technology works best for you and your students and how to kind of address that ed tech overload. We'll share some of our favorite ways to use our favorite tools in the elementary spectrum and the secondary spectrum of teaching. We'll stick around for a Q&A, anything that doesn't get answered as we go by our wonderful co-facilitators here. And there's about 1,000 slides at the end. Maybe not 1,000, too many, very many, just with extra tools, information, stuff that might be helpful to you later on that you can breeze through when you have time to breathe, which might not be this year, but nothing that we're telling you now has to happen now. This is all kind of like goes into your utility belt and you bring it out when you need it, whether that's this year, next year, further down the line. So please don't feel like we're asking you to do everything at once.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. Now, if you'd like to, if you're a Twitter person, you can go ahead and join us at #NEA_EdPractice. We'd love to see you there. Maybe Van Luz, they're super active on Twitter. They can, you can tell us when you see the first comment. But we do want, one of the things that we are just so fortunate to be able to do through the NEA is like we can leverage the capacity that our professional association has to connect us from all over the place, right? Like there are people like we're from Michigan, but we know there's people from New Jersey, there's people from down south, out west, up north, right? Like all over the place. And we're all here for this common, right? To spend just a little bit of time, right? Just a little bit of time, just these 60 minutes to talk about like, okay, well, what works and what doesn't? Like, how can I think about distance learning in a way that's going to work best for me, right? Keep me sane and for my students to engage in their learning. With so much going on, right? With so much going on, right? Like we don't even need to list it, but like, let's just like bring it all down. We're just going to talk about this one thing tonight. But let's check in a little bit, right? I want you to think about yourself as a 0 to 5, right? And we're going to drop it in the chat as like a little chat bomb here. So whenever you're ready, you drop it in there. It doesn't have to be a whole number. You can do fractions, you can do a range, but where are you? 0 is I have no idea how or when to incorporate quality ed tech tools for distance or hybrid learning. Or 5, I feel like I got a pretty good plan in place for choosing and for using ed tech tools for distance and hybrid learning.
And we know that there is a big difference between fully remote learning, a mix of remote learning and face-to-face learning, and then that fully virtual online school.
Right. And we know too that like there's some like I haven't been in my classroom since March 13th, right? But I know that there are teachers in my states who, they were out through the spring, but in the fall everybody was back face to face, and then they had their transition back to distance learning. So we wanted to bring this webinar back, especially for our colleagues who were in that situation. But I saw from, did I see a 0? I think I saw a 0. Yes, I did. All the way up to a 4.5. All right. All right. Now let's measure. How are you feeling? Right? Where are you? 0 is overwhelmed. 5, I got this. I'm feeling ready.
Overall, especially if you're maybe making a transition, like I know my district might be transitioning sooner rather than later to more of a hybrid model rather than a fully distanced remote learning model.
This isn't the question, but maybe we can just respond with like, you can put an F, an H, or a D. What are you? What's your district right now? Are you face-to-face? Are you hybrid? Or are you distance? All right, so an F, an H, or a D. Let's just see who's in the room. Face-to-face, hybrid, or distance. Oh my gosh, look at Sarah up there. She's all of them.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, face-to-face and distance is what we refer to as that hybrid kind of model. If you're kind of doing both, you're meeting the needs of students in person and online, that would fall in that sort of like hybrid space.
Yeah, look at all those. Started this, went to that, now we're back to that. We're going to try this.
the big point of this webinar tonight is, regardless of the way that your district is handling it, how those changes might come about. You might be there, you might go back. We know there's lots of flexibility in our situation, from county to county, let alone state to state. Hopefully these pro tips can help you find balance and space to feel success in your learning experience with your students.
Absolutely. Let's talk too, right? Like we know that this elephant in the room here around equity, and you know, our students' capacities, it's there, right? Like we see it in our students who don't come to class. We see it in our students who attend our virtual but don't, you know, ever unmute or have conflicting conflicting responsibilities. Like I have a student who has to leave class an hour early every day because he's watching his two younger siblings and has to make lunch, right? So that's new and different, and how, like, what do I do to support those things, right? So we do our absolute best to set up fair and equitable systems for our students to find success in. You know, we're leading with grace, but we're noticing those things too. We can't solve those today, but every once in a while, you're going to see that little elephant in the corner pop up on a slide, and it's just going to be a reminder. Hey, this is a move you might consider, or this is a tool that you could think about when you're thinking about access and equity. You know, and let's just be honest too. Like, there's a bunch of things that we know, but we forget all the time, don't we? Right? Like we forget that you can't, that you can't replace face-to-face with Edtech tools, and sometimes you go down to these rabbit holes, don't we? Right? And you're like, I'm going to make this amazing lesson, and then but it's just not going to be. So like, accept that. It's okay, right? Get some sleep. Right? We're understanding that we need to be clear with directions, that collaboration is going to look different, and like, finding ways for students to collaborate in breakout rooms sure is different than in small groups, but you've got some ideas in your back pocket at this point, and hopefully you're talking to people about what works and what doesn't. Think about how and what you're going to assess, because you need to make sure you're managing your own expectations, right? So if everything takes 4 times as long and is 8 times as annoying, like, there is no way I'm going to read like an essay. Just like, that's just not going to happen this year. So let's just be real about what we can and cannot do. Set up times to communicate, prioritize, and oh my gosh, like, lead with grace with yourself,
Yes.
right? With your colleagues, with your community and students. Like, let's lead with grace. Am I going too far with the stamps? Was that too much?
No, I love the stamps. I was just going to say, I love that, especially as a visual cue for students. I'm going to take that almost immediately and start using it, I think. So let's get into the talk. So EdTech, there's a billion of them, and it's so much. On the next slide, you're going to be introduced to Chris and I's new best friend, who we stole off the internet. There are so many platforms. There are so many services. Some of them cost money, some of them do not. If we are having students jumping from one to the other by logging into this one and then going into that one, if a single assignment is in 6 different places, we all end up feeling a little bit like our friend there. So on the next page, there's actually a link for you that profiles some 10,000 different loosely coined educational resources, apps, things out there. Anybody can say that they're educational. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's high quality or it's what we're looking for. And we know that some are vetted more so than others. So as you're making decisions, as you're thinking about, well, I haven't found something that works for math yet, there are collections, there are lots of options out there. It really comes down to what works for you. And we have some advice on that.
Right. I think starting,
No.
like, I think going to this Facebook page and places like this, maybe not even start there. Like, let's just be honest. Like, right, it'll say like thousands of free, like, well, which ones are good? We don't know. So
no,
maybe
it's more for wow factor.
It is
We wanted a little wow. So First of all, whatever you're using, even if you're bored of it, even if you've been using it since day one, if it works and you know how to use it and your kids know how to use it, stick with it. Don't get rid of it. Don't jump on the next bandwagon. Back in real life teaching, it was really easy to be like, I'm going to try this new thing today and like play with it. But it's so much more work to do this online hybrid mix of all of it. So for me, I think the number one thing is stick with what works, and go from there. Appreciate those known quantities and the value that they bring to your classroom by removing barriers for students. If it comes to the point where you need to add another EdTech tool or you need some EdTech support, ease into it, give it lots of time. You can't introduce a tool expected to go perfectly the first time and be satisfied. It will really take time for you, your students, to sort of master it and use it really well. If you would like to integrate a tool, give it at least 2 weeks with multiple practice points to see if it can really mature into something that's really great for your students. And we all know the one thing we don't have is time, but try to give yourself and your students time with each new EdTech tool, TED tool. When you are trying to figure out what might work, stick with your friends, whether they're in your hallway, they're in your district, they're on a Facebook group page, you find them on Twitter, whoever your friends are, reach out to them, check and see, have you used this before? Do you know someone that does? I'm having a problem with this. Does this work for you? Do you have something that works? And there are also great resources. One of our favorites is Common Sense Education. This is teacher vetted profiles for educational technology. You can get a star rating. You can learn a little bit about the privacy rating issues that may come up when you're using it. Really simple, one sentence like overviews, as well as general teacher reviews. So this is a really good way to sort of start vetting a potential boost to your instruction.
Yeah, and can we just like take a second on Common Sense Media? It really is fantastic. This has been around for years. A lot of us with young children at home, like the question that you ask, you're like, can my 8-year-old see the new Avenger movie, right? And you're like, eh. Then you Google it. A lot of times you end up in Common Sense Media, but they have a section devoted just to educators, where they review websites, pieces of ed tech, YouTube channels. And it's a side hustle. It's a gig for teachers.
Yeah.
So they pay teachers to review these. They work with an editor. It's high quality. And if you can't read the whole thing, because who's got time to read the whole thing? There's like stars and then like a couple little sentences. It is a great, great, great resource. Common Sense Education.
Notice our turtle. Slow is fast. Slow is fast. So we're going to move on now. Chris and I have developed some planning pathways for you, and we've made some slides just to help you sort of conceptualize and think about how do we address this technology and integrating it meaningfully in our classroom spaces. So I think it all starts with your platform, right? What do you need? What do you need?
Before we even talk about that, Ellen, can you talk about like how you need to take care of yourself first, just for a second? Don't tell the whole story.
We lead from left to right. We read and lead from left to right. I don't know. Self-care, community care, routine musts, your social emotional learning. These goals have to be met. They have to be addressed before you can get anywhere with your instruction. So please take a moment to lift yourself up if you need it by reaching out to someone who's a shiny, happy, marigold kind of person for you, and do what you can to be that for someone else, because I know we're all getting to the point where we're tired and it's hard sometimes. So absolutely make sure you're taking care of your self-cares first, and then think about, what do I need? when you address this sort of like major fundamental question of what do I need, you have goals that you need to meet. And the first branch Chris and I have sort of developed here is your mode of operation. Do you need something now from a pre-made library that you can just click and go and hope that it's good, or open and edit quickly, go over it, give it to students? Or do you really need to be able to create something for yourself that aligns perfectly to your content, you can spend a little time on, and you might get a little bit more specific payoff to your learning goals? Um, we have also thought through this sort of like, we've talked so much of Chris and I as friends and colleagues have talked so much about how we figure this out. And one of the hardest parts is managing your expectations when you finally find that quiz or that tool. If you go out there, you go to a pre-made library, you find a great quiz and you throw it out to your students, and one of the answers isn't clicked on the right way, and they're very frustrated by it. When you have spent way too much time on that pair deck and you finally got it and you're like, this is exactly what it needs to be, and your kids can't connect, or it's not working appropriately, or you can't share your screen, or something didn't show up the way it was supposed to. These can make us feel very defeated. But if we can manage our expectations, give room to practice every tool that we bring in, hopefully more than once, we can get to the point where we can then go back, evaluate that tool, evaluate our students, give some feedback, figure out what happened. And it's also really valuable to not only give feedback, but to get feedback from your students and to really evaluate that tool and if it met the needs of what you need with your students in the moment. Because you can decide then, do I spend more time on this, or do I never go back there again? Or do I do I approach hesitantly next time? It's all a learning curve.
Yeah, and I mean, I would also encourage you, like, if it's a giant failure the first time, like, maybe give it another go, right? Just
Yeah.
give it a try, because you're trying it for a reason, right? You've thought things through, and like this meets a need that you have, and like I said before, everything takes 4 times as long and is 8 times as annoying this year. So just give yourself some grace there too. So look, I mean, we also, I mean, we saw it in the chat a second ago, right? There's this, like, especially when we're thinking about hybrid, but really it's anything, right? The hybrid, our what face-to-face is actually going to look like, our distance learning, our schedules are all different. Or, are we going to do a block? Are we going to do 45-minute hours? Or is it going to be synchronous? Is it going to be asynchronous? Like, how many, right? Like, there's an infinite number of options. And we just want to, like, take a moment and talk about things, like, just remind things that and then maybe focus on some things to consider, right? So Ellen spoke to this a little bit, just like welcome and learn from what doesn't work, right? Be open and seek out feedback, especially from our students. And there's going to be challenges, aren't there, around your time, around engagement. But it is not about you. It is not about me. This is something much larger than all of us. And I think I forget this on the regular, and it's important that, when I talk to people like Ellen, we remind that of each other. So there's lots of things that right? You at this point who your team is, right? It could be the person you teach next to. It could be like across the district now, because you've reallocated your human resources, and now all the 8th grade science teachers meet together, once a week to plan the next week. But at this point, you've got your team, your learning management system, if it's Google Classroom or Schoology or Canvas or whatever. Your resources, materials, your community, what it needs and what it's going through, and you've got a schedule. So there's a lot of information that we have. And as we're considering, right, as we're moving forward and considering what's happening next, like, we need to, like, wonder about our classroom space, right? So how's that going to look the same? How's that going to look different? Your go-to educational Edtech tools. There's not really a number we would recommend, but, like, let's say a few, right? You've got a couple that you just, like, keep going to. And for a few, maybe that's like 2 or 3. But maybe for somebody like Ellen, maybe she's got 7 or 8 that she uses on a regular basis. But we want to make sure that students and teachers have an opportunity just to keep using, so you can really leverage those Edtech tools to do their maximum for you and for your students, right? You need to consider how you're going to use your technology in both places. Ellen, I thought this was funny. Her Go curriculum bag. I hadn't really thought about this. Do you want to tell, what do you mean by that?
So as an elementary teacher, I don't know about you guys, but I was constantly carrying like buckets and every teacher I've ever met has like 2 bags, 2 or 3, or their whole car. I don't know. I literally have a crate and a bag and another bin of like curriculum books and things that I would need to bring back to school with me if I went back physically. But if I'm creating stuff at home, I'm also going to need here. So there's that sort of like, some of my materials are online, some of them are not. Sometimes I just like to look at the book instead. So making sure your resources are where you think they are for when you need them is going to be a key.
Yeah. And the last thing to consider is how's it gonna, like, how's this all gonna work? Oh my gosh, how's this gonna work?
Breathe. Right. Everything that you're doing, every moment that you do it is as much as you can do, and that's okay. It's okay.
I was both of these guys today, like both of them.
Yeah. Breathe.
Yeah, as best you can, right? As best you can. Accept ASOS and be happy.
Yes.
Now, the first thing that we want to talk about, we're noticing some questions that are pretty specific in the Q&A. We might save some of those till the very end, but we're going to talk for a second about how to think, like how we think about what Edtech tools we're using, and that might answer actually a lot of the questions in the chat. Ellen's going to start with something called the Triple E framework.
So I was that bright-eyed, I want to try everything teacher. And it was a struggle for me because I was getting sidetracked a lot with creating things and then not really getting to all the content I needed to get to and jumping from tool to tool to tool, even as a first grade teacher. And we found success in a lot of ways with that. But honestly, when I learned about the Triple E framework, which was developed by Liz Kolb, a researcher that's affiliated with the University of Michigan, it changed my life. I actually had this printed out on my desk to kind of like help me pause myself and really check and evaluate not only my intentions with EdTech, but like what the EdTech was and how it was effective in the classroom. The great thing about the Triple E are the 3 parts. So we want to engage students, enhance their learning opportunities, and then extend that learning outwards. So the great thing about the website, which is linked for you, and each individual rubric, I think is linked as well, you can open that rubric and fill it out like as a Google form. So if you find that tool and you fill this out, it will give you a score, a rating that says, hey, this really might be worth your time, as opposed to this might not actually get your students any extra benefit. It might just be for fun. A lot of times something like a Kahoot can be super fun, but it might just eat away time and not really get your students any further. It might just be kind of flashy fun, like regurgitating known facts.
Right, 2 + 2 is 4. Yay, I got it.
Yeah, blue, I win! And they get obsessed about the score, and you're like, I don't care about the score. I don't care what place you came in. I don't care. Don't break their hearts. But one of the really good questions in the Q&A that I saw for sure was one about like planning and burning yourself out as far as screen time goes. You using a tool like the Triple E to evaluate and decide, is this worth my time and effort, might be a really good starting place for you to evaluate the tools you're already using, or maybe if you're thinking about using something new. So Chris is showing you here, this is the printed out rubric that I just had on my desk. It's really short and easy, and it literally just helps you to like sit down and evaluate how am I engaging my students and giving them social opportunities? How am I scaffolding those learning goals? How am I coordinating my tools and platforms? How am I adapting and using this technology in a meaningful, motivated way to assist my students? So the Triple E framework is a really useful tool for you to kind of get into and see how your technology is suiting your time.
Hey, get on your bed. Come here.
Boy. Jennifer, you're unmuted. So the Triple E is great. I highly recommend it. Take a little peek. That sounds like me all the time. My dog is scratching at the door as we speak. I'm like, shh. Okay. So Triple E, super fantastic. Trying to evaluate, is my EdTech tool worth it? Also, if you roll out something like, what's something that totally bombed? The first time I tried to use Formative, it was a nightmare. It totally bombed. But when I filled out the rubric, I knew that it could be really good for my students. And it turns out there was a disconnect between what I saw on the teacher side versus what they experienced on the student side. So having not done it from the student side, my instructions were wrong because I wrote the instructions from the teacher point of view when the student point of view is very different. So I was able to figure that out and know that it was worth my time to get my students into Go Formative, which is a great different sort of mode of reporting out thinking tool if you're not familiar with Go Formative.
One of the great things about the Triple E, it's research based. It's from the University of Michigan here in Ann Arbor, and the researcher, Dr. Kolb, is a fantastic advocate for public educators and comes and participates regularly with us as we're running local teacher supports. But like literally, it's a one pager, right? It's gone through like the rigors of academic research. Data has been collected, analyzed, like the words on the page have been studied and discussed for like probably 10 years, and this is the result. And you know, if there's something new and you're like, well, I wonder if I want to do it, you can just like pop your way through it, and this helps us answer that question. Well, should I use it, right? Kahoot has somebody always like gives me a hard time because I pick on Kahoot. Kahoot is a fabulously wonderful, engaging tool, but it definitely has its limits, right? And as you fill this out, I didn't fill this out thinking about Kahoot at all. I just did it totally random. But like as you are engaged in thinking about like, well, what's the outcome that you want for your students? Wow, does the Triple E do just a wonderful job supporting that thinking? All right.
So that covers the why. The next slide is going to cover some of the which.
Right. So this is like, okay, well, when do I use Edtech Tools, right? So what I really like about this one, this is another researcher, Caitlin Tucker. She has left academia and is now, you can go to her website. As soon as you go to her website, you will see, you've seen her before in social media. There's just great teacher tidbits, right? Like little quick videos if you wanna, if you're interested, lots of downloadables. And because this is her gig, she'll also come to your district and as a paid consultant and help support your district's efforts in distance learning and specifically blended learning, which is where it all started. But anyway, what the 5E instructional model does is that it kind of gives your lesson design like somewhere to hang it, right? Excuse me. So if you're thinking about sorry, I gotta get my straw here. If you're thinking about your hook, right? So that's the engage piece, right? So the constructing knowledge part. So it doesn't matter if it's pre-K or if it's or if you're all the way up into secondary, right? Here's some tools, like what does it look like, right? What does it look like? And then she provides some ideas about, okay, well, what kind of tools could you use? So by now, some of these are gonna feel familiar, right? Like maybe you've used Padlet before, maybe you haven't used a Google Classroom question and you've never heard of Mentimeter, but you've got a couple that you could like think about as you're trying to engage and construct knowledge with your students. Then moving on, she'll, the exploring part, the investigate and the collaboration. This is the researching, the figuring out, the background knowledge, right? This is what it might have looked like in the classroom. And then these are tools that you might use to support that exploring. It could be like Google searches or YouTube, right? News ELA, Smithsonian Tween Tribune. I've never heard of that one before, actually. Every time I read that one, I'm like, oh, I need to go, what the heck is that? Anyway, but again, there's lots of these that are looking and sounding familiar, right? Just sharing your information in a Google slide deck. Then we've got explain, which is your mini lesson. A lot of us are going to do that if it's at a distance or hybrid. We're still going to, if it's hybrid, in my mind, if it's hybrid or if it's fully distanced, we're still kind of preparing it in much the same way as it was fully at a distance. So the lessons are going to live within your my Google slide deck. Elaborate, that's the application and the practice, the reevaluating, the sharing, right? This is where students are making connections, applying, explaining, and creating, right? Here are some opportunities for you to kind of reflect and think about and pieces of ed tech that you might use. And as you're looking through these, again, probably some of these you're like, oh my gosh, I love quizzes, right? I use that all the time. So like as you're thinking about, like if you haven't like thought about ways to hang your your digital lesson, right, your distance lesson, the 5E is definitely one way that you can consider. The last one, oh look, I forgot, I could have done that and made it nicer the whole time, is evaluation, right? This is where we are considering our assessments, right? Our formative, our summative. And again, you're going to see some that are familiar: quizzes, Kahoots, a Schoology quiz, right? Or it doesn't have to be a Schoology, it could be like an embedded assessment within your LMS, a Google form, a Socrative, or like shoot, you could even do like I'm forget what's the one with Flipgrid, right? Like that would be something that would work too. But at her website, there's printable links and with printables, links, videos for bite-sized chunks if you're so interested. Yeah, look at all these people. Quizzes over Kahoot for sure, right? We need a T-shirt made. We need a T-shirt.
So on the next slide, Chris and I, we picked out some of our favorites and some of the best teacher vetted sort of go-to spaces that not only give you the opportunity to potentially go the DIY route, right? Like create your own, but there also is a bunch of content that's pre-made that you can grab and go with. You can either grab and use right away, or you can grab and edit to make it fit what you need. So these are some of our favorites. Some of them are more template based, like Pear Deck allows you to just sort of insert your own learning goals into a pre-made space. Whereas others are fully formed activities like the Seesaw Activity Library, which is just chock full of amazing teacher-made activities that are so easy to just grab and change, adapt. Seesaw is really great too for our younger learners because you can record the directions with your voice, with a video, attach an example, everything all in that one space. So these are some of our favorites where you can not only create your own, you can also take from a pre-existing library.
Yeah, and a lot of them you can see like people like they'll get upvoted so that you can see the really popular ones. And if you click on any of these links, it'll take you right there. So for example, if you're like, oh my gosh, formative, I need to know more about it, you just come to slide 23, click on the link, and it'll take you right to the menu. All right.
What do we know, Chris? What do we know? I think the very first thing that was the biggest learning curve for me was the consistency feature. So you want to make everything as same as possible in the hopes that you can reduce those barriers that students have with accessing and understanding not only what they're supposed to be doing, but the why of what they're supposed to be doing and the how. So color coding parts of your day, parts of your schedule, connecting familiar routines with a recognizable image. I showed you, this is an image I got from Pixabay, which is a free image source space so that no one will come for me. So when my students see that on a slide, they usually know it's time for them to stop and jot. We use that a lot, especially in Reader's Workshop. Having a familiar outline where students will really understand the progression of the lesson, having a predictable order of like, here's the instruction, here's the example, here's the lesson must do, right? Here's the review. However you can set it up so that even if the material between might change, there's like a very specific sort of flow to your general assignments. That's very helpful. And I think one of the best tricks I've learned is making sure that anything that's a link that I want them to click on is always its own color that doesn't match anything else. I use a bold, bright red color for any word that I have linked to go somewhere else. Actually it's red if it goes to their classroom, and it's blue if it goes somewhere outside of their Google Classroom. So when they open that, they know whether they're going right to their assignment, their work, where they can find it in their classroom, or if they're going somewhere new.
I dropped in the chat, it's a link to this right here, Planning for a Week of Distance Learning. If you'd like to see more examples, at around minute 50, we talk about that in a previously recorded webinar. So we want to take a second and talk about some of our go-to elementary and go-to secondary EdTech tools. Again, a lot of them are going to feel familiar. None of them are going to bring you 100% engagement, right? Like that's I mean, magic even when we're in our classrooms
Right.
together with our students, right?
Yeah.
But we do have some favorites. So Ellen, why don't you go ahead and talk about it?
Yes. Okay. So in my classroom, I usually have my smartboard or my whiteboard and projector, my anchor charts. All of these little blue lines are links for you so that you can see some examples of what I'm talking about. I'm only going to ask Chris to open a few to show you specifically. One of my favorite ways to have anchor chart spaces is actually, I'm working with 6th graders this year. And I know I said I'm elementary. Technically in my district, that's still elementary. I have a lot of 1st grade experience too, so I'll kind of share both. But from the upper elementary range, in that smartboard, whiteboard, anchor chart section in the yellow, there's numbers and fractions. And Chris is going to see if that'll open up. This is an example of a Google slide. Do you see that link, Chris, with negative numbers and fractions?
Got it.
When we open this up, this is an example of me having done a math lesson with my students, and they were very confused about negative numbers. They did not really remember what a mixed number was or an improper fraction. So I had moved on in my math unit and realized that we did not have some fundamental vocabulary sort of remembering. So what we did is we went as a class and we went out and we found resources to help each other learn on this topic. So of course, it'll load in the next century. I pulled over some vocabulary slides from our future and past lessons, as well as some examples that I had found, but I basically charged my students with going out and finding instructional articles, videos, anything that could help each other with that topic. So I think slide 5, slide 6, get to so I put the student's name on the top, and then I told them, I want you to find a link, I want you to find an image, I want you to find, type your own example, however you want to do it, but help your neighbors learn about negative numbers. So students went out, they found their own materials, and they brought them back to our anchor chart. All the first ones are negative numbers. The following ones are mixed numbers or improper fractions. And this was a way to reduce my workload going out and making something new. And what we did is, as a warm up for a few days, we would come here, and instead of doing a normal math routine warm up, we would come here and we would practice, we would look at these resources. So that was really helpful for my students. So that's one way we've gotten around the fact that I just don't have my, my anchor charts.
Well, I really like this because kids can kind of like sneak and peek and see what other kids are doing too. So to help scaffold their own like understanding. Yeah, that's really nice.
I have more examples of that on my page, actually. If we skip down to assessment, Chris, there's group style. I was getting so burned out looking at, I didn't make it for everybody. I'll fix that. I was really struggling, sorry you guys, with having students filling out constantly, like everybody having their own assignment and me having to go through and then score every single one individually. So what I've been doing is a lot of group slides instead. So I will fix that link immediately. All it was going to show you was a slide where everyone, like a good 6 or 8 kids on every slide, are then giving their own opinion, answer, whatever it is. Another way to look at that would be the ELA lesson under audio visual directions. Chris, that's bold, probably a good one. Directions are really a challenge. It's really difficult, even with older students, to get them to know what we're doing. Please know that all of these images are sourced from Lucy Calkins. I am using them. I'm a licensed district. But basically we use these, the format's always the same. We always start with the layout of our mini lesson, followed by group activities, The only quick fix is to give access or to make it public. What probably happened is I set it to Monroe Public Schools only, which is the default, and forgot to change it to view all. You usually have to refresh that that resource to get it to show up. But if you scroll down, Chris, to any of the bright yellow slides later on, you'll see that instead of having every single group, every single kid turning in their own thing, my kids are doing that all at once. So instead of giving them each their own copy of the assignment or the assessment, what I'm doing is everyone gets the same copy. We edit it all together, and then I can go through and score kids based on their participation. Did they leave their central idea? Did they rethink their central idea? Does their group have an example? So these are our nonfiction book studies. So instead of giving every single kid their own copy for me to then go and look through everything, I'm doing a lot of it all in one space. Math and Reader's Workshop are primarily done in these shared spaces with very few assignments that are assigned specifically to each student.
Looks like Disease Book Club is the most popular this year, huh?
They were that was one of our set topics. It was not like a spur of the moment. So when it comes to grading the shared Google slide, even though it's for the whole class, you can go through. I have a grade book in my planning, and everything. A lot of what we do is sort of general. It's participation based. It's evidence of learning that I can then reflect in the report card. When I need to know something specific about a specific student, I send it directly to them. Yeah. Especially with writing or with a reading, like a specific question for sure. So I'm going to stop, but you go ahead and you click on any one of those links. And if there's another one that I forgot to check, I'm so sorry. I was obsessive about this all week and I still missed one. Let me know, but open some of these up, see how we've used different platforms. And if you're an elementary teacher, one of my biggest EdTech tool advice for you is Symbaloo. Symbaloo is a visual link sharing tool. It changed my life with my first graders. It really allowed them to get anywhere I needed them to be, whether it was a Google slideshow, a document, a website, a platform like Prodigy Math. Symbaloo was the easiest way for them to make that visual connection to a button link. It was perfect. So check out Symbaloo if you need help getting your students to where they need to go.
And what's so great about Symbaloo, it really is pretty self-explanatory, but like if you go down to the bottom here where it says web mixes, we talk just for a second about these web mixes because it's just like such a nice thing
we only got like a few minutes, Chris. You better talk about your secondary tools. All the links are there for you. You can see them, I promise. And my email is available to you and my Twitter, and you reach out anytime and I will help you, I promise. All
right. So let's do our go-to secondary ed tech tools. Now, you're going to notice that a lot of them we get to repeat, but I do want to point this out. If you have never gone to teachfromhome.google and you are a Google user, this is an amazing resource for you. Very early in the pandemic, Google put ideas and examples and explanations and resources all in one place that answer questions that a lot of us now, you're right, like, you probably don't need to know some of the answers to some of these questions anymore, but there's still lots of really great resources. If you maybe, you don't need help with Google Meet anymore, but like you just don't really know how to make a quiz in Google Form, this is a great tool for you to use. I kind of followed the same format as Ellen here, right? So like here's my regular brick and mortar classroom, and kind of this is how I'm thinking about it for distance and hybrid and the distance face to face. So the instruction and practice for me really kind of lives within slides. So there's two examples here. One is an asynchronous example. So this one was created for students last spring because we were not doing anything at the same time, but this year we are. So I want to show you kind of go back to some of those teacher moves that Ellen had mentioned earlier around colors and symbols and things like that. When you click on the link, it'll force you to make a copy. Just bear with it for just a moment. So as this loads, you're going to see that this is just one day. For ours, like we have 3 classes a day, 100 minutes, or actually now it's 90 minutes long. It used to be 100 minutes, but the community told us that that was just too much time. And one of the things that we use, if this will ever load, oh my gosh, is this repetition and pattern. So like there's a visual pace and flow for students to help them as they are kind of working through. You can see this first page that it's skipped while presenting, but you can kind of see the different, our topics and the universal color coding and icons that we're using across our district. This is something that we do, but then these are things that we've added at our own school that we use at our school. And you'll see that a lot of these things are just repeated, right? So if I were to share a copy day 2 or day 1 or day 7, this slide appears every single time. So this is their splash screen when they come in. You can see the icons in the upper right hand corner, and we're using our ideas like this idea prominently to help cue kids in on what they're doing. We also kind of color code it, so you can see that right here. But if you're interested just to see like what another school is doing for synchronous and asynchronous and practice, you can look there. We're also some of my favorite pieces of formative feedback, like honestly, like I love it in the chat. I love it in the chat for a couple of reasons. It keeps my kids engaged, right? If I ask them silly questions, right? And sometimes I'll ask them to show me thumbs up and thumbs down. Sometimes I'll give them the power to rename themselves for like a minute. And like the renaming can be like how I group them or how they're answering a question or something like that. Obviously it's just like one word, but just silly things like that just kind of help keep my students engaged. And it's also a red flag for me to see what students aren't engaged, so I can check in on them later. Because again, I try really hard to lead with grace and approach all my students with like, they want to be here. I want them here. Like, how can we, is there something going on that I can help with? There are some Edtech tools that I really love. Google Forms. Give me a GF in the chat if you use Google Forms as a quiz with feedback provided for kids. Like one of the most powerful things that you can do. Like I love that so much. They get immediate feedback. You can load it in there. If you've never done this, you can click on this link. And a lot of these links are YouTube videos to tutorials on how to turn that tool into an assessment. This one just happens to be from a friend of ours, John. So well, not a friend, but like he's a Michigander, so like that makes us friends, I guess. And he's a Google certified, just like I don't know what's above teacher. I don't know, just like experts. Our mini lessons, a lot of times we're going to do that in our video conference tool of choice, or in a screencast if it's going to be asynchronous. Edpuzzle, if you've never used Edpuzzle, oh my goodness, like please click on this link and take yourself here. Edpuzzle is such an amazing tool that allows you to literally be in 2 places at once. If you've ever shown a movie, stop the movie you got a little note to yourself, stop it at 1 minute and 15 seconds and ask this question. That's kind of what Edpuzzle can do for you. I'd recommend that you kind of keep it to the short end. I think anything more than 5 minutes, you kind of lose a lot of your mojo engaging in Edpuzzles. But if you want to, like, if you've never seen an Edpuzzle before, there's a free version of Edpuzzle. Plus, there's a huge library of materials that teachers have created that you can use. My room, we've moved from Google Classroom to Schoology, like many of us. Like we've gone to a more robust learning management system. And the last thing that we want to talk about is just like the space for creating and thinking. Oh my gosh, like at the very beginning, like this is what my situation was looking like. My kids, like I was in charge of watching my kids while I was also teaching. So they were sitting over here kind of in this area and I was standing up here, but I couldn't sit down in those chairs anymore because I was dying. And now I've kind of like moved into this. So I'm actually standing right here right now. And this has been a slow evolution, but you know, we needed to, you know, you need to have those kind of like thinkings, right? You need to like decide like what's going to work best for you. Like one of the, there's been for me like two investments that have like changed my life. One is a wireless, you know, these are AirPods, but like a wireless headset, and the stand-up desk for me. Like sitting down just like ruins me. I
I
see
think
that
the
it is.
Bluetooth or the wireless headphones will be really big back in the classroom too if I'm doing hybrid and I've got students online and offline. Being able to have them in on the speakers in the classroom or in my own ears so I can check in with both, that might be really important.
Oh my gosh, you're right. And Bill Van Loo mentioned the second screen. Like, yeah, that was definitely a game changer, right? Like increasing your real estate. So I don't know about you, but like, oh my gosh, I feel like this. I also feel like we need another like 30 minutes. But like we appreciate y'all being here tonight so much. We want you to know, like Ellen said earlier, like, you know, there are many right choices. There are many right choices. Like give yourself some grace and some space to try things out and make mistakes and, you know, and figure out what's going to work best for you. If you've got questions, please feel free to reach out to either one of us. Our contact information is at the front and at the end. We are going to drop this exit ticket in the chat here in just a moment. There are a series of webinars that the NEA has hosted on lots of different topics. They're on a YouTube channel if you're interested in any of them. Just click on the link, it'll take you right there. But we want to get this back to Ms. Christine Sampson-Clark to wrap us up for tonight. We'll stick around for questions afterwards. Christine, it's all you. Thank you.
Yes, I'm here. I didn't go anywhere. Because, and it's funny because I remember when you presented this earlier on, I sat on here as well. And so I'm still just as excited and I wrote down lots of notes and I looked in the chat and someone was like, please slow down and open more links. And I think that's what happens, right? I'm steady trying to open links. I'm doing screenshots. And so just a reminder, this will be available on www.educatingthroughcrisis.org. So give us a few days to get it uploaded, but it will be there. I'm going to get some more information from Bernita about that. But there's so many great tools. I wrote down some notes. I wrote down teachfromhome.google, commonsense.org/education, because I'm a big proponent of getting reviews from people who've already used it. So I can't wait to read some reviews. But also I love that you said, find your marigold and be a marigold for someone else. So in the end, give yourself grace. This work is hard, right? And we're probably working 3, 4, 5, 10 times harder trying to balance distance learning, hybrid learning, in person when you got masks and shields on. So give yourself grace, find someone who's going to be your support and then be someone's support. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was such an important takeaway for me as well. I see the exit ticket is in the chat, and I know Bernita wants to give us some closing information, but thank you so much, Chris and Ellen. This was amazing, as was the first time, and as you built onto this and added so many more tools, it's even more amazing. So thank you so much.
We are super happy to be here tonight. Oh.
So let me say thank you to our presenters from Michigan and also their amazing colleagues who were answering the Q&A and trying to post things in the chat and try to follow things. Both Ellen and Chris, I'm always amazed at how you multitask. You do such a great job. So thrilled to have you both here. Give us a few days, as Christine says. I am still recording as we speak. And then we will get the recording up. And if you go to this nea.org/webinars, you will find the directions on how to go to our LMS, Learn Upon, and you can download the certificate with your name on it. And so you can hopefully turn that into your principal or your district to get some hours. But we appreciate you. I don't know, Chris and Ellen, do you want to, were there questions still? Usually you all
Oh,
sort of sit for a few
there were
minutes.
so many good questions. I think there were a lot of them about screen time and like managing that time. I put in the chat at one point, it's really important for me that students have the choice. I do have older students this year, so sometimes I'll tell them like, okay, if you're taking notes, if you're doing your stop and jots in a notebook, then I need a picture of them, right, on this blank document so that I can see that you're participating, or I check in with them on that one-on-one. I try to build in those opportunities for them to either make a slideshow or a real life poster that they can then present. So I do try to work in lots of ways for students to do both, to have a little bit of space from the online. I also try to build mini lessons so they're 10, 15 minutes and then give them that time to work. So they're like maybe not looking at the screen the whole time, but reading or writing or solving their math problems or whatever it is.
Great. So really invite you and implore you to actually fill out the exit ticket, because that's where the topics for the webinars come from. We look at those exit tickets, we read each one, try and figure out where the majority of people would like us to go next. We invite you to come to our next one, and thank you for your time and hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. So.
Yeah, there's lots of good. I'm just going through and looking at all the questions in the chat, or excuse me, the Q&A in the chat, and there was a common one that I saw I think most frequently was like, what do you do to keep your students engaged? Like, don't think that 100% of my students are engaged. Like, I've got ghosts, just like you've got ghosts. And they're occupied in for many important reasons. They are ghosts. So we do the very best to provide as opportunities for them to engage when they're there. We reach out as frequently as we can, and we try to we try to do centrally through our school. So it's not like every teacher is calling. It's, you know, our principal or our counselor is calling once a week or so.
Again, for those hours, the PD, in just a few days, this will be up on NEA or NEA.org/webinars. And you'll be able to find the link to get your PD credit for that, our slideshow for you, the recording, all of that.
And we really encourage you to please share this webinar and any of the other ones that you have gone to with your colleagues. Not everybody can come on some evenings, other activities, or they just don't have it in them that night. But share the information and make sure as many of our members and as many students as we can are served.
Yeah. Even when you're super proud and excited and there's a handful of kids that are super into whatever you're doing, there's always those few that never log in, don't log in frequently, don't really participate, but they're there. That happens to all of us and the best of us. Something I tried today was the secret code word. I was just talking, I told them it was going to come. And then during the middle of like the writing lesson, I was like, here's your secret code word. If you type it down, you'll get the thing we talked about. But the secret code word was cabbage today. So every student that wrote cabbage, I put in a drawing, I pulled out a name, I called their parents today to say, your kid is the best. I can't believe how well they pay attention. I am so impressed. I hate phone calls home to parents. They make me anxious. I told my kids that. They make me nervous. And so they know that it was something that I am happy to do for them. But then, you know, you're not calling out those kids that may not be able to participate, but you're able to say, hey, you knew the secret code word, and do that call home, touch base with that parent, just say, hey, you know, so-and-so got the secret code word today. They were paying really close attention. I'm so happy for them. So the secret code word was super fun. We tried that today. It worked out really well. Also using tricks like having specific colors in your visuals be something that they have to say out loud is really helpful. Getting the student to share the screen with the visual while you talk about it is another way to sneak them engagement. you'll see on one of my resources that even if you open that literacy slide, they have roles in their groups they have to sign up for, things like that, all different ways to kind of like nudge them to participate.
So somebody
Ellen?
asked about the Epic pointer thing I was using. Those are just the annotation tools in Zoom. So there's when you go into your Zoom tools, there's one called Annotate that you probably never clicked on before. That's it.
Ellen, somebody wanted you to talk about the secret code word again.
I literally warn them that it's going to be coming and that they better be ready for it. And if they're not, they could get a phone call home about how they weren't paying attention. So then they're like waiting for it very intently. And then they put it in. And then I say, just kidding. I'm calling to tell your parents you were paying attention. And I have a wheel with their names on it and I spin it. And then it'll be like this kid. And I'll be like, oh, they did the code word. And then I'm like, all right, I'm going to call your parents later. And they're like, secretly like, oh man, you know, so I called today. His parent is actually very sweet. So I called them and was like, hey, they knew the secret code word today. It was great. Sometimes you don't have to tell them who you picked, and then you can pick someone that doesn't get a lot of love, you know, and say to their parents, hey, so and so. You could even call more than one. That probably would have been even better. So you can call the one that you were like, oh, you win secret code word today, but then call someone else's and be like, hey, by the way, so-and-so was paying really good attention. I'm so proud of them. It's a really fast, easy way to make that connection with the parent and give the kid the gratification of being one of the ones that's in tune with the work. And I literally just stopped like mid-sentence. I was like, on slide number 8, you guys are, this just in, code word time. The code word is cabbage. Write it in the chat or you lose, right? Like all of them are writing cabbage. It was spelled in 1,000 different ways. Just a fun way.
Chris, you had asked if there was anything we wanted to add, and nothing I specifically want to add, I guess, but just to kind of reinforce something that you and Ellen mentioned earlier tonight, which is about consistency and structures. So I just really want to reinforce how important that is. I mean, if you think about this in the physical sense, students have a sense of what to expect when they walk in your classroom, right? There are going to be tables, probably they have some kind of assigned seat, they know what the chairs are like, they have a sense of kind of how that structure is going to work. And the more we can build those same kinds of structures into our remote learning, the better. Like those are the things that might feel like they get boring to us, and they might even get a little bit boring to students as well. But when you're using those same kind of structures as you're building your Google Slides, or as you're formatting your links, or as you're building those routines, those become things that students can really rely on. It'd be like, imagine walking, opening the door to the classroom and like everything is rearranged every time you do it. I mean, that's kind of the opposite of what we want, right? We want that structure to be in there. So I just wanted to highlight that. That was something that, as you talked about that, it really hit home for me how important that is.
It's hard too, I know, because sometimes I feel like it's getting stale and like boring.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
There's other ways to zhuzh it up other than like your outline kind of deal, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a link on zhuzh it up. There's a link on my go-to elementary edtech tools somewhere about our chill spaces. One of the other webinars you can hopefully visit talks a lot about building community spaces online. This is a version of one that I did with my students that hopefully isn't blocked for you because I have problems. But I had my students create their own virtual space and they get to link it to whatever they want. It can look however they want. They can add little Easter eggs in there for things that they can share, favorite video games, YouTube videos. I look at all of them, I promise. And they know that if there's something that shouldn't be there, then the whole slide gets deleted and they're so devastated that they would never let that happen, right? Right.
Right.
But I have students that are constantly updating their links. They have a really good time with it. And it's one of our transition activities. When we have a little bit of buffer time between subjects, they can go to each other's chill spaces and kind of check them out. Again, these are older kids that can handle that. Littler kids, it might be, not quite so easy. But you might be able to do it for them, give them, a slide or a link or an image, and then you can help them link it to something they love. And then you can do that as like a warm up or a morning meeting exercise. tricking them into caring about each other online all the time.
Okay, it looks like we are coming to about the end of the questions. We want to thank everybody. Have a good evening. Look for the recording. Give us till Friday, and chill out a little bit this evening. Whatever your go-to, whatever your go-to TV show is to watch, find 15 or 20 minutes to get involved in that. Forget the craziness a little bit. Bye-bye, everybody. Good night.